It was the sound of her laughter echoing from the hallway that made my hands shake. Not the kind of laugh you save for friends or sitcoms, no. This was that low, breathy kind she used to reserve for private jokes between us. But it hadn't belonged to us for a long time. I stood in the kitchen, slicing into a bruised banana with the side of a butter knife. Not eating it, just cutting, listening. The suitcase wheels thunked against the floorboards, a sound too casual for what it carried. And somewhere behind her chirpy phone call and the clink of her perfume bottle hitting the vanity, I could hear the faint zip of a travel bag being sealed shut. Her vacation was tomorrow. But tonight, I finally did something for myself. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I didn't even ask her who he was. I just slipped a folded piece of paper into the lining of her favorite beach tote, right under the neatly folded romper she bought last weekend just because it was on sale. Ironic, considering she hasn't gone shopping with me in months. The paper wasn't long, just enough for her to know that while she packed her little escape, all smiles, all lipstick and lies, I had quietly packed her guilt right along with it. She thinks she's going to meet someone new. She doesn't know she's bringing me with her too. Not in the way she expects. Tomorrow, she'll open that bag looking for her sunglasses. She'll find me instead. And that will be the first honest moment we've had in a very, very long time. She must have read it in the hotel room. That's the only explanation for the silence that followed. No calls. No texts. Not even one of those passive-aggressive emoji replies she'd use when I annoyed her. Nothing. Just a vacuum of sound that hummed louder than any scream. The night after she left, I barely slept. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, imagining the exact moment she would unzip her bag. Would she be lounging on a balcony with a cocktail when she found it? Maybe slipping on that striped bikini, the one I hadn't seen in over a year? I imagined her smile fading slowly, her fingers freezing when they touched the corner of the folded paper I'd tucked beside her bronzer. She was supposed to call me when she landed. She didn't. And that silence? It said more than her voice ever had. I didn't go to work the next morning. Instead, I sat on the living room floor with an old box of photos I hadn't touched in years. Us in Maine, covered in sand. Us laughing in a diner somewhere off-route too. Her nose scrunched. My eyes tired but soft. I remembered that version of her, the one who used to wrap her legs around me in the kitchen while pasta boiled behind us. And I hated that I still missed her. Around noon, I finally got a message. But it wasn't from Alora. It was from an unknown number. The message was short. Just a screenshot of the note I had written, and nothing else. No caption. No reaction. No explanation. Just my words, reflected back at me. I stared at it for over 5 minutes. Every instinct in me screamed to call her, to demand answers, to ask why she couldn't even give me the decency of a conversation. But then, before I could act, another message came in. This time it was a photo. Her, sitting on a patio chair. Not alone. There was a man's hand resting on her thigh. He wasn't even hiding it. His face wasn't in the picture, but his presence bled through it. Her drink was tipped toward her lips. Her eyes? Fixed on the camera. On me. Cold. Defiant. Like this was some kind of twisted message. And just like that, I broke. Not because I saw her with another man. I had expected that. But because it wasn't even secret anymore. She knew I knew. She had read the note. And instead of calling, instead of owning up, she sent me a message. I don't care that you know. It's strange, the things your body does when you hit a certain kind of heartbreak. Mine went numb. I stood up without realizing it. Poured a glass of water I didn't drink. Walked to the bathroom. Sat on the closed toilet seat for 40 minutes, just staring at the grout lines. At some point, I opened our shared laptop. Her email was still logged in. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe confirmation that this trip had been premeditated. That she had planned this little escape with him while I massaged her feet on the couch. That she had chosen this new life with the same care she once chose our wedding cake. What I found was worse. There were flight confirmations. But 2 tickets, not 1. There were dinner reservations. Massage appointments. An itinerary titled, Sedona Couples Detox Weekend. My name was never on it. And right then, I knew. She had replaced me. Not emotionally. Not slowly. But completely. Erased and overwritten like I had never existed in her narrative. But this isn't a revenge story. I didn't go scorched earth. I didn't track her location or show up screaming at some spa in Arizona. Instead, I started packing too. Only this time, it wasn't a bag. It was my life. She had always told me the attic was just a mess of Christmas boxes and old textbooks. I never had a reason to doubt her, not until that photo. Not until the second message that made my hands go cold, the one that felt less like a warning and more like a dare. I didn't go up there because I thought I'd find more evidence. I went up because I couldn't sit in our bedroom another minute. The smell of her perfume still lingered in the sheets, her towel was still damp on the bathroom door, and the coffee mug she used every morning. But first, yoga in pink lettering was mocking me from the sink. I just needed a space untouched by her. Somewhere her new life hadn't infected. But I was wrong. When I pushed open the attic door and pulled the string for the light, I expected dust and cardboard. What I found was a small plastic bin, new, unlabeled, and way too clean to have been there long. I pulled it toward me and popped off the lid, heart pounding in that quiet, primal way that tells you you're about to see something that changes everything. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Not from me. From him. Printed emails. Handwritten notes on thick, cream-colored stationery. Movie ticket stubs. A folded hotel receipt. The earliest one was dated over 16 months ago. 16 months. So much for, he's just someone from my yoga group. One letter stood out. It was addressed to her and signed G. The same initial I saw in her phone once, half a year back. She said it was a woman from work. I remember asking. I remember her laughing, rubbing my arm, kissing me too fast and too sweet. She lied like it was oxygen. Effortless. This letter, though, it wasn't like the others. I think about you even when he's standing right there. I can't wait until this joke of a marriage is finally done. You deserve sunsets, not silence. I'll give you the world, L. Just say the word. I didn't realize I was gripping the paper so tight until it tore right down the middle. I couldn't breathe. Not because of the affair that part one already knew, but because this man didn't see me as competition. He saw me as a prop. Background noise. An inconvenience she just hadn't deleted yet. And apparently, she agreed. I staggered back down the stairs, letter still in hand, barely able to keep myself upright. My legs felt like rubber. My lungs were trembling. I walked into the kitchen and dropped the torn letter onto the counter like it was radioactive. I wanted to scream, break things, set fire to something. But instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, my sister. Hazel and I used to be close. Until Elora started creating little cracks between us. She's too critical, Elora said. She doesn't respect boundaries. At some point, I just stopped inviting Hazel over. Stopped replying to her texts. Elora never explicitly told me to cut her off, but she never had to. When Hazel picked up, her voice was quiet. Careful. Hey, she said. I was wondering when you'd call. I didn't even have to explain. She already knew. And what she told me next unraveled everything. Apparently, Elora hadn't just been seeing this guy. She'd been planning with him. They'd gone to a lawyer. She'd started gathering financial documents. There was even talk of selling the house, a conversation she had privately with a realtor 3 blocks from here. And worst of all, she had changed her listed emergency contact from me to him. Hazel knew all of this because a friend of hers worked at the clinic Elora visited after her last yoga injury. The one I wasn't needed for. The one she said she'd handle alone because you stress out too much, Milo. Turns out she wasn't alone at all. I hung up the call numb and shaking. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. Calculation. Months, maybe years of quiet replacement, brick by brick. Smiling in my face while building an exit behind my back. But I wasn't going to be the final brick she placed. She had left for a weekend getaway, assuming I'd sit here and simmer in silence, maybe even cry a little and forgive her by Monday. But when she returned, she wasn't going to find me, or the house, or anything she thought she owned. There's a certain madness that comes with betrayal, not the loud, chaotic kind, but the silent unraveling of everything you thought was permanent. I didn't scream. I didn't drink. I didn't even cry. I just sat there in that chair at our kitchen table for almost an hour, staring at a woman's name on a real estate flyer she'd hidden in the drawer beneath the microwave. Elora had planned to sell the house. Our house. My house. And somehow, she had convinced herself she'd get away with it without my signature, like I was just a name on a light bill. But she forgot something important, something I didn't even remember myself until that moment. The house was in my name. Mine alone. I hadn't thought about it in years. It was a decision we made before the wedding, when her credit was a mess and her student loan debt made joint financing impossible. I paid the down payment. I signed the mortgage. She moved in with her pastel throw pillows and hanging plants and made it ours. But legally, It never stopped being mine. And in that moment, the shift inside me wasn't rage. It was clarity. While she toasted margaritas on some overpriced Airbnb balcony, I began to undo the fantasy she had spent months, maybe longer, carefully constructing. I started with the accounts. I moved half of our joint savings into my private account, the one she never knew about, the one my grandfather helped me set up right after college, before Alora was even in the picture. I didn't touch all of it. Just enough to protect what I'd earned. Just enough to remind her that erasing me wouldn't be free. Next, I changed the locks. It was surreal, watching the locksmith work in the early evening sun. He didn't ask questions. I think he could tell. Something in my face must have said, "A man who used to have a wife lives here now." When he finished, I thanked him and handed him a tip that I couldn't really afford. He patted me on the back like I was a rescue dog. Then I packed a box. Not for me, for her. I walked through every room and filled it with the things she'd miss first. Her custom hairdryer. Her favorite books. The framed photo of her and her mother at the Grand Canyon. The old flannel shirt she wore on rainy mornings, the one that smelled like vanilla and deception. I labeled it clearly. Alora, do not return. That night, I slept in the guest room. I didn't want the master bedroom. I didn't want the memory of her laughter against my chest, or the echo of the lies she told in that space. I lay on the lumpy twin bed, staring at the ceiling, and let the stillness settle like dust on a long-forgotten shelf. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I remember the dream. She came home and walked past me like I wasn't there. She took the box, the note, and walked right back out. I ran after her, but my legs wouldn't move. I shouted her name, and she laughed over her shoulder. In the morning, the sun felt sharper. My head clearer. I showered. I dressed. I shaved for the first time in a week. And then I did the last thing she never expected. I called our lawyer. His name's Alan, a quiet, silver-haired guy who's been helping my family with documents since my parents' will. He didn't know about the affair. I didn't tell him. I just said I needed to review a few protections regarding property and separation of joint assets. And then he asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. Are you filing? I froze. I hadn't decided. Not really. But the words left my mouth before my brain could protest. Yes, I'm ready. That afternoon, I signed the papers. Quietly. Privately. No fireworks. No last-minute change of heart. It felt like canceling a subscription I'd forgotten I was paying for, one that drained me every month and gave me nothing in return. I left them on his desk, hands trembling, heart weirdly steady. Then, just as I stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, my phone buzzed. It was her. No text. No photo. A call. The screen glowed with her name, the name I used to whisper against her back when we danced in the kitchen. I stared at it for 5 full rings. Then I answered. Milo, she said, breathless. We need to talk. We need to talk, she repeated, slower this time, like I hadn't heard her. Like I was the one who'd vanished. Like I was the one who had slipped away for a secret weekend with someone else's hands on my body. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit between us like a ghost. I wanted to see if she could survive it. Milo, she said again, sharper now. I found the note. So there it was. The confirmation. She'd read it. She knew I knew. The game board was flipped over, and we were standing in the wreckage of every move we hadn't said out loud. I braced myself for one of two things, either an apology sculpted out of insincerity or a justification soaked in self-pity. But I wasn't ready for what she said next. Why would you do that to me? To her. I almost laughed. It bubbled up so fast, so violent, I had to put a hand over my mouth. She was hurt. She felt betrayed. I'd exposed her affair with a folded piece of truth, and now I was the villain in her story. Do what? I asked calmly, walking out to the front steps, letting the sun hit my face like I needed to prove I was still real. You blindsided me, she snapped. You humiliated me. That wasn't fair. It hit me then she hadn't told him. Whoever G was, she hadn't shown him the note. She was still living in the double life illusion. She was angry not because I left the note, but because I'd threatened to collapse the version of herself she'd constructed for him. I told the truth, I said quietly. I gave you what you never gave me. A pause. Then, the sound of her breathing. Tight. Rapid. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Things they got complicated. They don't look complicated in that photo, I shot back. You looked very clear about what you wanted. Silence again. Milo, she said, and now her voice cracked, not broken, but cracked like ice under pressure. Can we just talk in person? I don't want to do this over the phone. That was her move. Always was. Pull it back into emotion, into presence, into proximity. Control the narrative. Use body language, tone, tears. Rewrite the past while standing in it. But I wasn't stepping into that theater again. You can come back if you want, I said. But your key won't work. And you'll find a box with your name on it at the front door. That's all there is. You're serious. As a signed divorce petition. She went quiet. And then she hung up. Just like that. No more begging. No screaming. Just a dead line and the faint echo of her leaving for the second time, this time not from the driveway, but from the inside of my head. I went back inside and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at my hands. I expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt hollow, like someone had extracted every version of me that once bent over backward for her, and left only a tired man in a hoodie wondering what kind of fool spends years apologizing for being quiet, while his wife rehearses lies in the mirror. That evening, Hazel came over. I didn't even have to ask. She brought pizza, 2 bottles of ginger ale, and a fire in her eyes I hadn't seen since our dad's funeral. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't need to. Instead, she placed her laptop on the table and said, "There's something else." I leaned in. Turns out, Hazel had spoken to someone I'd almost forgotten about. Darian, one of Alora's old coworkers from the startup job she had before the yoga teacher phase. He remembered something weird. A rumor that Alora had once been caught logging into someone else's HR profile to pull salary data. It was never proven. She talked her way out of it. But Hazel pushed. And guess what? That same real estate agent whose flyer I'd found in our drawer? She wasn't just helping Alora sell. She was Alora's cousin. They'd been planning this together. The goal? Quietly liquidate the house while I was still living in it. Sell it to the cousin under a fake name, then flip it again with Alora getting a secret cut. A double sale scam. The paper trail was thin, but real. And Hazel had just enough screenshots and contacts to prove intent. My wife, the woman who kissed me goodbye just 3 days ago, hadn't just cheated on me with another man. She had tried to erase me from my own life and profit from my disappearance. I felt sick. I felt alive. I felt like I'd walked through a fire and come out missing half of myself. But now I had matches of my own. The night after Hazel showed me everything, I didn't sleep. Not because I was overwhelmed, that had passed. The grief, the confusion, the self-blame, all of it had burned off in a quiet, controlled fire. What I felt now was focus, precision, like I was no longer reacting to her betrayal but finally shaping my own response. For once, I wasn't the man holding the pieces. I was the man drawing the map. At 2:13 a.m., I opened my laptop, sat on the cold floor of the guest bedroom with my back against the wall, and started documenting everything. Every message, photo, bank transaction, time-stamped call, and flight itinerary I could find. I didn't care if some of it overlapped or repeated. I wanted the full scope, every corner of her deceit drawn out in brutal daylight. If she was going to lie about her intentions, she wasn't going to lie without opposition. I labeled the folder, Alora, exit plan. I didn't even have to get creative. She'd left such a clear trail. Most people don't clean up behind themselves when they believe they're untouchable. That morning, I called Alan again. He sounded surprised to hear from me so soon, but I explained what Hazel had found, the attempted double sale, the forged communication, the cousin's involvement, and Alan didn't even pause. "This isn't just divorce anymore," he said flatly. "This is fraud." I asked him if we could pause the original filing, not to forgive her, but to adjust our approach. He agreed. "We'll go on offense," he said. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I do now. By Friday, we'd filed a preliminary injunction with a judge, a request to legally block any transaction involving the house. I authorized a full forensic audit of the shared financial accounts. Alan even reached out to the cousin under the guise of a routine escrow verification, just to gauge how far this little scheme had gone. Alora still hadn't called. Not once. No texts. No emails. No, "we need to talk" follow-up. That silence told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just avoiding confrontation. She was waiting. Waiting for me to calm down, to fold, to crawl back into the shell she always kept cracked open just enough to make me believe I still mattered. But that version of me was gone. She hadn't just lit the match, she gave me the gasoline. That weekend, I started prepping the house. Not packing, not cleaning. Prepping. I took down every photo of us. Every framed memory. I removed her name from the mailbox. I boxed her wedding dress, which she had shoved into the back of the hall closet under a pile of old coats, and sealed it with duct tape so thick you'd need a chainsaw to open it. I didn't throw anything away. That wasn't the point. The point was control. By Sunday morning, the front porch had a small sign taped to it. No soliciting. No trespassing. No exceptions. Beneath it was a note in Elora's handwriting, one she'd written years ago and stuck on the fridge after a neighbor's kid broke our window with a baseball. It said, "Respect boundaries." The irony was delicious. At 11:04 a.m., a silver SUV pulled up across the street. I watched from the living room window as a woman in oversized sunglasses sat behind the wheel for a full minute before getting out. Elora. She didn't look like someone coming home to reconcile. She looked like someone arriving for a negotiation she assumed she'd already won. She walked up to the front door, suitcase in hand, and stopped when she saw the note. She tried her key. It didn't work. I watched as she turned it once, twice, then checked the lock like maybe it was rusted or jammed or anything but what it was changed. She rang the doorbell. I didn't move. She knocked. I stayed seated. Then came the shouting. "Milo, this is insane. You're acting like a child." The same words she used 2 years ago when I asked her not to flirt with some guy at a New Year's party. The same tone. The same script. Only this time, I wasn't on stage with her. After a minute, she stopped yelling. I thought she'd leave. Instead, she walked around to the side of the house. I should have expected it. She still had the code to the side gate. She slipped in through the back and made it to the patio door, pressing her face against the glass like some stranger trying to identify what pieces of herself were still inside. That's when I walked up. She looked startled when she saw me, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. I opened the sliding door just enough to say one sentence. "I didn't write that note for closure," I said. "I wrote it to let you know I finally see you." She opened her mouth to speak, but I closed the door before she could. Then I pulled the blinds. I didn't need to hear the next part. I knew exactly what was coming, the tears, the guilt, the subtle positioning of blame disguised as regret. She knocked twice more. Then she left. I waited an hour before I opened the door again. She was gone. But her suitcase? Still there. Inside, tucked between a bottle of sunblock and a crumpled receipt from her flight, was the note I had left her in Arizona. Folded, creased, and reread so many times it looked like paper on the edge of dissolving. She hadn't thrown it away. She hadn't responded either. And that was all the closure I needed. I thought the silence after she left would feel victorious. Like I'd reclaimed something. Like I'd stepped into the next chapter of my life and slammed the door shut on hers. But the truth? The house was too quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow, like someone had taken the soul out of it and left behind the shell. I tried to fill the days with noise. Fixed the leaky faucet in the laundry room. Caught up on bills. Replaced the light bulbs in the hallway that had been flickering since spring. Hazel checked in constantly, bringing groceries, sending podcasts, even forwarding me a few playlists titled "Getting Over It" and "Men Who Deserve Better." I appreciated it more than I could say, even if I couldn't bring myself to listen yet. But then, for days after Elora's attempt to barge her way back in, someone knocked on the door again. Not the front. The back. I froze. It was early evening, and the last of the sun was pouring gold through the windows. I crept toward the patio, expecting maybe Elora again, ready for another scene, maybe even another performance. But when I pulled the curtain aside, it wasn't her. It was a man, late 40s, maybe early 50s, button-up shirt, gray at the temples, tired eyes. I opened the door a few inches. "Can I help you?" He looked nervous. His hands were clenched like he'd rehearsed this and was still debating walking away. "You're Milo, right?" he asked, glancing toward the living room behind me. "Elora's husband?" I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. "My name's Graham." My stomach turned. That name. G. The initials from the letters. The hand on her thigh. The man who called me invisible without even knowing my name. I opened the door wider. He didn't wait for an invitation. Just stepped in slowly, like a man entering a church, hat in hand, guilt on his sleeve. I didn't come here to fight you," he said immediately. "I didn't even come to defend her." I stayed silent. I wanted to see where this was going, not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to know how deep the rot went. "I didn't know she was married at first," he admitted. "She told me she was separated. Said you were living apart. Said you were controlling, jealous, emotionally distant." I almost laughed. Emotionally distant. The man who once canceled a work trip just because she said she was having a bad week. The man who sat through her 3-hour spiritual cleanse seminar because she said she needed his energy support. The man who apologized every time he felt upset because her tears always came faster than his words. He looked ashamed. I figured it out pretty fast, though. When we stayed at that inn in Flagstaff last October, her phone kept lighting up. Your name. Missed calls. She got angry when I asked. Said you were harassing her. I folded my arms, kept my mouth shut. Let him hang himself slowly. She said you threatened to kill yourself, he added, almost too quietly. My jaw tightened. I'd never said anything like that. I'd never even hinted. But it didn't surprise me. It was the perfect lie, unverifiable, dark enough to justify deceit, tragic enough to make her seem like the victim in every room. I didn't know what to believe, he said, finally sitting down on the edge of the bench outside the door. I was already in love with her. And once you're in that deep, logic doesn't really matter. You start lying to yourself on her behalf. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is everything, he said. Emails, voicemails, screenshots, bank transfers, her conversations with her cousin about selling the house. The whole plan. I thought she just wanted a fresh start. I didn't realize she was conning us both. I took it. Still didn't speak. She told me last week that you threatened legal action, he said. That you were trying to destroy her. That you were vindictive. But then, I got a copy of the divorce papers from her cousin's inbox. And the note you wrote? She left it at my place. I read it. He looked up at me. She didn't deserve that kind of grace, Milo. I would have burned her world down if I were you. But you gave her dignity she never gave you. I stared at him. Part of me wanted to scream at him. To tell him he was complicit, that he'd helped dig this hole, that he didn't get to walk in here with a sad face and walk out redeemed. But another part of me, the broken, quiet, exhausted part, knew the truth. She used him too. I finally spoke. What do you want from me? He looked up, eyes raw. Nothing. I'm done. She's not who I thought she was. I just thought you should have the full picture. He stood. I didn't thank him. I didn't shake his hand. But I didn't stop him either. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside were truths. Dark, ugly, sharp-edged truths. And beneath all of them, something even worse, a second note. Not mine. Elora's handwriting. Just a few lines, scribbled and crumpled. Don't leave him yet. He's still useful. Wait until spring. We'll have the house by then. She hadn't written it to Graham. She'd written it about him. 3 days passed before she showed up again. I should have known she'd come. Elora never left anything truly undone. Not out of love, not out of guilt, but out of control. She always had to write the last line, be the final voice in the room. And this time, she came dressed for closure. Hair perfectly curled. A soft beige sweater, no makeup but just enough lip gloss to look naturally devastated. I opened the door before she could knock. I didn't want the neighborhood to hear. She blinked, clearly surprised. Milo, can we talk? Say what you came to say. I replied, stepping aside without inviting her in. I stayed in the doorway. The boundary was intentional. She looked around, almost like expecting to find a changed man living a broken life. Maybe she thought she'd find a mattress on the floor and dishes in the sink. Maybe she hoped I'd still be the soft, uncertain version of me, the one she could twist back into her story if she smiled just right. Instead, she found the house clean, sparse, ordered. Her things were gone, her sin erased, her ghost exorcised. I made mistakes, she began, trying to soften her voice. But I never. You lied. I cut in gently. To him. To me. To yourself. You built a future on a lie, and when it collapsed, you came back hoping the past would shelter you. She hesitated, tears forming. I didn't expect you to change the locks. That's because you never expected me to change. She swallowed hard. I miss you, Milo. No, you miss the version of me that didn't know any better. And he's gone. The words didn't come from a place of anger. They came from truth. For the first time in years, I was speaking from a place untouched by fear. No more begging to be enough. No more watching her drift further with every compromise I made. No more apologizing for being the man she convinced me was too quiet, too boring, too soft. She looked down, maybe expecting me to reach out. To say, I forgive you, or let's try again. But I didn't. Instead, I handed her the second note. The one she wrote about Graham. The one that exposed every twisted strategy behind the performance. She read it. And when her face fell, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Shame. Real, unfiltered shame. She folded the paper and didn't meet my eyes again. I never thought you'd find that, she whispered. You never thought I'd stop loving you, I said, stepping back into the house. But I did. And then I closed the door. Not slammed. Just closed. That was the last time I saw her. A year has passed. I live in a new city now. Different house, smaller space, more sunlight. I adopted a rescue dog named Rizzo. He barks at his own reflection and hates vacuum cleaners. But he curls up on my feet when I read, and that's enough. Hazel and I are closer than ever. She was right about Elora from the start, but she never said, I told you so. Instead, she helped me rebuild, one quiet morning at a time. And me? I'm not the same man who wrote that note. I'm stronger now, not louder, not harder, just more whole. Some scars don't fade, but they stop bleeding. And when you stop chasing explanations from people who were never honest with you to begin with, life has a funny way of opening new doors. Elora? I heard she moved out of state. Graham didn't go with her. I don't know where she is. I don't need to. Because I'm here. Present. Healing. And finally free. And for the first time in years, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a man who was left behind. I see a man who walked away and never looked back.